What's up, guys? Today we're going to look at the NAVGRID for the Heatblur F-14B. The NAVGRID is a way to create a reference point that can be used to create extra situational awareness by providing or receiving voice codes that identify position that can be referenced on the NAVGRID. Now, if you're familiar with bullseye callouts, this will likely make immediate sense and come fairly easy. For those of you who don't know what bullseye callouts are, let me give you a very high level demonstration to help you understand how to use the NAVGRID properly. If you want to go ahead and skip this, fast forward to this time index. Okay, let's set up a scenario. You're on a flight heading towards bullseye, which is positioned over Maycop. Your flight is due east of Maycop, about 150 nautical miles. If someone were to ask you your position, you would be able to tell them you are 090 for 150. That's a heading of 090 from bullseye for 150 nautical miles. Pretty easy, right? That is literally all there is to do. And when you are given callouts to possible enemy positions, you can create a mental picture as to where they are in relation to you because you know where you are in relation to bullseye. So as a quick example, if you heard pop-up group bulls 320 for 80, you could mark them in your head or visually on a map to help build up your situational awareness. If you want to know more about the proper comms and the different callouts for various situations, I suggest you check out this video on the Fighter Pilot Podcast YouTube channel, which goes into much more depth than I have here. Okay, so now that we have that out of the way, let's take a look at the NAVGRID. The NAVGRID is a reference point known as YY. Using the cap, you can change its position, sector count, coverage, and heading. If you're in an air start jet, the NAVGRID will automatically be set up for you based on the mission's position of bullseye. It will be set to 4 sectors with a coverage width of 50 degrees, and the heading will be from YY to the first valid waypoint in the following order: HA, DP, ST, FP, waypoint 3, 2, 1, HB, or failing all of those, the aircraft's location at start. If you're in a cold and dark jet, you will need to enter the NAVGRID reference point manually. To do this, turn the cap drum to DL for data link. Press message button 3 to enable NAVGRID. Then turn your TID mode to ground stab. Now let's put our NAVGRID right over in Maycop. So first we enter our latitude by typing on the cap, clear, lat, north, 4440, enter, then clear, long, east, 40, 112, enter. Once the coordinates are set and we have our TID and ground stab, the initial view will put the reference point at the edge of the TID at the heading position, and the grid will extend on heading toward the center of the screen. Now at first this might be a little confusing, since you may or may not see your own plane on the screen. To help with this, you can use the HCU offset function to change the position of the view if necessary. If you need to reset the NAVGRID view, simply switch your TID mode off ground stab and back. Now the NAVGRID is not your traditional rectangle grid. It is actually only ever an arc of a radial grid. The arc, which we will refer to as coverage, can extend anywhere from 30 to 180 degrees. We can configure it to show anywhere from 1 to 6 total sectors, and if we don't care for the heading of the grid, we can change that too. First, let's change the coverage. To do this, we go over to the cap and hit clear, alt. So for this example, let's use 90, so 90, and then enter. Now you can see our coverage is at 90 degrees. Now let's change the number of sectors we see. To do this, we go back to the cap, and we press clear, number, and let's change it to show 6 sectors, so 6, and enter. Okay, now last, let's change the heading. Back to the cap, can press clear, heading, and let's use the reciprocal heading 270. So 270 and enter. Now you can see the grid did an about face and is pointed in the opposite direction. These configurable values are really only here to help you. So in the end, it's going to be personal preference how you use them. Having more sectors and a smaller coverage area gives you the ability to more accurately describe where a threat is because of the proximity to the visual cues of reference. But this also clutters the screen and might make it harder for you to actually read. So really it's up to you and how you want to use it and set it up. Let's break down the visual components of the NAVGRID. First, we have the sector strobes. These lines contain tick marks at 50 nautical mile intervals. The short ticks are for 50 nautical miles and the long ticks are for 100 nautical miles. This can help give you a visual indication of how far away from the reference point something is. When you are in NAVGRID mode and ground stab, any hooked waypoint or track will read back its own position in reference to our YY position at the top of the TID. For example, if I hook a waypoint, you can see that it reads back a heading of 316 at a distance of 6.5 nautical miles from our YY reference point. If I hook a track, we see the same readback at the top of the TID, but also a code to the left of the track that is alternating with its altitude. This code is known as a voice code. It is what would be broadcast over comms to communicate what the RIO sees to whoever needed the information. The code can be broken down into two components. A 2-digit bearing from our YY reference point. This number is the bearing divided by 10. So 27 would be 270 plus or minus 5 degrees. The second component is our distance. Now, I know what you're thinking. Jabbers, this is an alpha character. Last time I checked, distance was a number. Well, you're right. But in this case, also wrong. The alpha character represents intervals of 50 nautical miles. So, A means 1 to 50, B is 51 to 100, C 101 to 150, and so on and so on. The reason for this is that in the case that you are using the HCU offset function, the center of the NAVGRID may only be partially on the screen. And in this instance, you have no way to tell what interval the tick mark means on the NAVGRID. Does this tick mark mean 50, 150, 250? Maybe you know, maybe you don't. So this is where the letter helps. In this instance, it is an A, so we know that the bandit is somewhere between 1 and 50 nautical miles. The last thing to note on the NAVGRID is that your own ship will have its own voice code to the left of it in AC stab while NAVGRID is enabled. Now, Jester has been given the ability to set up NAVGRID as well. It is under the Navigation NAVGRID menu. Most of this should be self-explanatory because of the information I just gave you, so I will leave this to you to explore on your own.
And a bandit, bra, 290, 29 miles, 30,000. 8 o'clock.
I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. Thank you guys for watching. Remember to like and subscribe, and I will catch you guys next time.
Spike, 6 o'clock. He's on our 6. 8 o'clock low. 9 o'clock. 4 o'clock high. 5 o'clock low. 4 o'clock low.